What drug is illegal to consume but is safer than alcohol? The answer is marijuana. Today I'll be performing a speech on a question which is growing more and more popular each day. Should marijuana be legal for consumption in the United States? To answer this question, I'll be presenting the 4 best arguments on the subject, 2 of which will be against the legalization of marijuana, and 2 of which will be for the legalization of marijuana. To start off, I will be doing my against arguments, and the first of which I have is marijuana is considered a gateway drug. This means that when someone uses marijuana, they have a higher chance of then progressing on to a harder drug, such as cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, opioids, you name it. A Yale research study found that marijuana users were actually 2.5% more likely to abuse opioids than just alcoholics or cigarette users alone. This is dangerous because if we were to legalize marijuana, we would not want to then see the people who are consuming marijuana on a regular basis to then graduate on to opioid abuse, which has killed millions in the U.S., heroin, methamphetamine, you name it, those are dangerous drugs that kill people daily. The second argument for being against the legalization of marijuana is that it can impair driving. It can cause people to be in motor accidents and not only kill themselves, but others as well. Marijuana is well known to impair the senses and cause people to be, under the influence, unsober. The more you smoke, the less in control of your actions you can become. And the fear is that if someone was high and they were driving down the street, they could possibly run into another motorist and seriously injure them, or they could run into someone crossing the street. They could fall asleep while driving. If you're on the interstate and someone merges into you and you can't, you're not sober enough to see that, you could cause an accident in that regard, and it would be your fault because you were under the influence, you were not sober. Another issue with that is that marijuana is well known to slow reaction times. So if you were driving and the people in front of you suddenly put on your brakes and you were under the influence of marijuana, there's a good chance you would not be able to stop your car in time. Next, I'll be moving on to the arguments for the legalization of marijuana in the United States. The first of which is the government can make money off of the sales of marijuana through taxes. If the government were to set a sales tax, like with cigarettes, the possible, The possible income that they could generate would be in the billions. An example of this is already California, who has surpassed $1 billion total dollars in revenue just from the sales of marijuana. California alone makes close to $3 billion so far just from the sales tax on marijuana. And I actually have a little chart here on the sale of marijuana over 2 years in California. So basically how this works, let me get over here, is on the y-axis you have hundreds of millions of dollars. So 50, 75, 100, 125, all the way up to 200 millions of dollars. On the bottom, you have each quarter in the fiscal year, starting in 2018, going to 2019. So this would be quarter 1 in 2018 all the way through quarter 4, and then quarter 1 in 2019 all the way through quarter 4 as well. So as you can see, in the first quarter in 2018, the total sales revenue for the taxation of marijuana was just under $75 million. And as you can see, it has steadily increased all the way up to around $176 million generated in a single quarter in sales taxes just from the legalization of marijuana in California alone. So the argument is, if we were to legalize it everywhere, we could see a ginormous leap in total revenue gained for our country to go towards other programs, infrastructure. For instance, the education lottery in South Carolina, which is actually paying for a decent amount of my college education, just comes from taxes on lottery tickets and being in the lottery. So back to my first speech, if we have a problem with healthcare in the United States, perhaps legalizing marijuana could generate the taxes that we would need to do something on that scale. The next argument is that it could regulate the market and stop illegal drug trade. So, for instance, right now, if, say, I were to go try to purchase some marijuana, that would be illegal. In South Carolina, that is illegal. If I were to disregard that law and try to buy some anyway, I have no idea what I'm buying. Buying it from just some random shady person who could have done anything to it with no repercussions, because what he or she is doing is already illegal. So the argument is, if people are buying these drugs illegally, and you see it every day, through studying or getting ready for this, I found an article that said that recently in the Midwest, people who had bought marijuana, they had bought it laced with rat poison, and people were bleeding out of their eyes, bleeding in their lungs, and about 4 people had died already. And this is not uncommon. You see marijuana laced with fentanyl, which is a extremely potent opioid. You see it laced with all sorts of stuff, and without government regulation, no one can stop this, and you're pretty much just gambling on whether or not the marijuana you get is safe for you to consume. So the argument is, if the government took control and were able to set up regulations in the marijuana industry to say you can't use these pesticides, these herbicides, you can't put any chemicals in it that could harm people, then you could see a much cleaner product that would generate more sales, and it would be taxed, so that money could go back into the American system, and you'd see less people dying from dangerous marijuana. In conclusion, the main arguments against the legalization of marijuana were it was a gateway drug that could lead you on to trying more dangerous drugs, and it impairs driving and can cause people to be in motor accidents or just other mishaps that have anything to do with reaction times. The two arguments for the legalization of marijuana is that the government can make money off of it through taxes, and it could regulate the market and make sure that people who buy marijuana know what they're getting and will no longer be poisoned inadvertently through bad product. So at the end of the day, I have presented the arguments that are most commonly used for this, and the whole point of this speech is so that you will know and now be educated on what the arguments are and form an opinion on your own. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a great rest of your day.